digressing too much. Let me come back to my story. Now this Ramakrishna is attracting lots of personalities to come and interact with him. He's saying, come my children, come. And the first one who comes is one of the most exciting, most interesting, most unusual characters in the story of Ramakrishna. Remember I told you last time there was a householder disciple who was an atheist, Dr. Ramchandra Dutt, an atheist. And then he became this great devotee who built the first temple of Ramakrishna, printed the first thing, or about Ramakrishna was printed by, so one marvelous. Now this Ramachandra Dutt, see how these various personalities come in touch with Ramakrishna through these very simple, almost casual relationships. Now this Ramchandra Dutt had a little houseboy. This houseboy had come from Bihar. Bihar is the poor part of India. So the people in Bihar, if they want to earn a living, they would go to Calcutta or Bengal where they would find a job. Let me tell you the story of the first person who comes in touch with Ramakrishna, a young boy. Now this young boy was born in Bihar. We don't know exactly when he was born. No, he doesn't know himself. But this young boy, born in Bihar, his name was Rakhe Tu Ram. Ram, as you keep me, I will live. This little chap from a very poor family, his parents had died at a very young age. Was looked after by a very kindly uncle, and they had given this long-winded name, Rakhe Tu Ram. Now you see, if you're a poor person like that, if you have long names, people won't tolerate that. So they'll immediately shorten it. And I have good experience. My real name is Jai Prakash, they turn it into Dilip very fast. So this Rakhe Tu Ram was called Latu. Now this Latu was a servant boy in Ramachandra Dutt's house. And this Ramchandra is excited about Ramakrishna, talking about Ramakrishna in the household, saying, this Ramakrishna, incredible personality. I met him, he's a god on earth, talk like that. And little boy was listening. He thought, I must see him, I must go and see him. So he kept begging his master, when you go to see him next time, can you kindly take me with you? I want to see this Ramakrishna. A young boy, I think he was 13, 14-year-old at that time. So Ramchandra took him with him one day. And the little boy would sit near the feet of Ramakrishna and look at him. And you see, this man, Ramakrishna, knows who's coming, what is the caliber of all these personalities. So he looked at the little boy and said, Ramchandra, where did you get this fellow from? He asked as if he kind of like acquired some equipment. Where did you get him from? I don't know, he's working for me. He's very special, he said. He's got signs which are very special. While he's talking, this Ramakrishna touches the young boy. This is dangerous. Don't let him touch you. You have to find out how. He touches the young boy. He's sitting, listening, Rakhe Tu Ram, listening. He touches him. The moment he touches him, this boy shudders. This will happen because all your kind of impurities are immediately being knocked out, and you shudder. You're casting them aside. Your impurities are being cast aside, and your spiritual nature is being unfolding. Is allowed to unfold when a person like this touches you. He touched the boy, and the boy started to shudder and started to shed tears of joy, going like that, shuddering. And Ramchandra said, what are you doing to him? Oh no, I'm just checking him, he said. He's checking his depth. What spirituality lies in the boy. He's testing him. He said, oh yes, very good. He calms him down. He says, please let this boy come here. Whenever you come, send this boy. He is very special. Let him come here again and again. Ramchandra said, no problem. Now this Ramchandra would send, of course, he is the devotee of Ramakrishna, he would send him fruit and flowers and food from time to time. And who will carry the stuff? Of course, this Latu. So Latu said, this is what I would love. He would love to take this stuff to Ramakrishna. He's in great fun. And every time he comes, Ramakrishna would ask him some simple question. What do you think of this? What do you think God is doing now? You'd ask him, and the boy would say, I have no idea. And the love between this young boy and this master begins to become very warm, very close. Tremendous attachment is developed. Now, one day, Rakhe Tu Ram goes to Ramchandra and says, I don't want to work for you. Now, he's a little poor servant boy. He can't survive. He says, I don't want to work for you. I want to live in the temple. So Ramchandra wanted to pull his leg. He said, how will you survive then in the temple? Here you stay, I give little money, food to eat, shelter, clothes, I buy you everything. How will you survive? The little boy is very, very guileless. He said, when I go to temple, they actually give me prasad. I will live on the prasad. And they still won't let him off. They say, but what about a piece of cloth? You need to put some cloth on yourself. What about the cloth? Because they don't give clothes in the mandir. And this Raketuram said, wouldn't Ram Babu please give me one piece of cloth? He's begging for a piece. And they are laughing. They're saying, oh, poor chap. He said, don't worry, we'll give you a piece of cloth as well. And you can go. They asked. Ramakrishna said, yes, let him stay. This relationship between Latu and Ramakrishna is one of the most unique and one of the most unusual. In later times, Swami Vivekananda said, if you wish to say, somebody would ask me, what is the miracle of Ramakrishna? I'll point at Latu. I said, look at him. He's the miracle of Ramakrishna. Complete rustic, and see what is going to happen. And during that time, Ramakrishna said this. He said, my boy, you don't have to do any learning. Don't need to go to school now. It's too late for you anyway. But day will come when you open your mouth, the purest of Vedas will flow from your mouth. Prediction. And I'm going to, as we go along the story, you'll see what material comes out of his mouth. Even Swami Vivekananda would shudder sometimes. He would put Swami Vivekananda to task. Tremendous material would come out of this illiterate boy, this Latu, a servant boy. Now you see, when they are working together, various things begin to happen. And Latu has this tremendous love and devotion of singing, singing and dancing. He loves, he's a young boy, he loves to dance and loves to sing the glory of God. This pours out of him, and in front of this master, this is allowed to flow. He will use your best characteristic and allow it to flourish so that it becomes spiritual. This is the case with Latu. This is happening, and let me just touch on this idea of this song and dance. I think it's necessary. You see, singing and dancing are some marvelous thing human beings possess to express themselves. These are powerful things we possess. They can be used for our benefit or they can be used for our detriment. Last night I was at a reception, and there, I've done this myself many a times, I'll be very honest. There, people were getting wine and champagne and things were going. I had to stay, a very close relation, and I had to stay. I was watching all the fun. As the evening went on, they became more and more drunk, and then the disco music started. So forget about the youngsters jumping and dancing and joining in. The uncles and aunts, the kakas and the masas all jumped in before the youngsters. They were more keen than the youngsters because I think the wine had got to them. And they all with big pot bellies, short kind of hanging out, kind of open button like that, the tummy almost popping out, and dancing away like, Travolta or something, going on. I said, give it up. The power of music and dance can be very positive, it can also be very negative, and I've seen both sides. So this is what I was watching. But the thing is, here Latu is singing and dancing in the name of God. You see, we have not had that experience. When a person who is God established sings, I tell you, we will all jump up and start dancing around him. This was the usual thing in the story of Ramakrishna. Hear the sweetest voice. And the thing is, the voice now carries tremendous power of experience, spiritual experience. So the moment he opens his mouth, and even small, light, very sweetest of the voice will come out, it'll catch our hearts and make us stand up and dance about with joy. The whole atmosphere in that little temple garden house, in that little temple, that little room, would get charged up, and people will start swirling. Even people who are very kind of, like that, very kind of, uppity and very kind of stiff, would lose their stiffness. It will capture them. This is the fun and games going on in that little room of Ramakrishna all the time, day and night. And this Latu is becoming a master at this. One day, Ramakrishna asked Latu, can you go in the Shiva temple and worship Shiva? You see, he knows where the boy comes from and where he belongs. He sent him to the Shiva temple. This Latu, this illiterate young boy from Bihar, goes in front of the Shiva Linga. He offers, bilva leaves. He sits in front of it, and then we don't hear from him. So Ramakrishna, where is Latu? Somebody is still in the Shiva, the little Shiva temple. Ramakrishna, let me go and inquire. Let me check on my disciple. So he went quietly into the Shiva temple. It's very small temples, they're not huge. Little Shivling there. And Latu is absorbed. He's in front of the image of Shiva. He's upright, stiff, kind of perspiring. You see, sometimes in the process of meditation, this is a bit of a disturbance. Sometimes your body will perspire. You shake and you perspire. First you shake and perspiration will pour out of you. And this boy is shaking and perspiring in front of the image of Shiva. Ramakrishna quickly ran back to his room, got his fan out, came back again with a glass of water and a fan and started to fan the boy. This is reality, not making anything up. Started fanning the boy. And the boy was like that. And after a long time, the boy came out of meditation and saw his master fanning him. And he is such a humble boy, very humble. He said, "Master, I should be fanning you. You're not supposed to fan me. This is terrible. I'll get, this standard stuff for Indian boys. I'll get pap, sin. This is sinful. To allow my master to serve me, this is not acceptable. This is horrible. Why are you doing that?" Master smiled. Ramakrishna said, "My boy, I was not fanning you. I was fanning Shiva. You are expressing what Shiva stands for, depth of meditation. You are established in the depth of meditation. I was fanning Shiva, my boy. You don't get any pap, don't worry. Drink this glass of water." The master serving the disciple. This was the close relationship between Latu and Ramakrishna. He lived with his master throughout his life. And there are stories I'm going to tell when I talk about Swami Vivekananda in a minute. I'll tell you how this Vivekananda relates to Latu. Here is this prakhara, intellectual, and here is this rustic. And you see how they interact with each other. I'm going to talk to you in the later stage of this particular story. But let me talk about Latu a little bit more. You see, he was a very unique character, out of this world. He could not conform to any regulation. Once the master said, "How can you go to sleep at night? You should be meditating." That was enough for him. From that day on, he would meditate all night. And later on, even when they started the first, the monastery, and all the brother disciples, in the middle of the night, they'll just, put the oil lamp out and go to sleep. Everybody go to sleep. 9 p.m. Switch off the, snuff out the oil lamps. And then they could hear click, click, click in the middle of the night. They were living in very poor condition. They thought some rats or mice are now beginning to play. It happened every night. So one of the brother decided there's some mischief is going on here. So next day, I'm not going to sleep, I'm going to wait. As soon as that click, click start in the middle of night, he struck a match. And he saw Latu quietly sitting up, doing his meditation, beads, turning his beads. That's why the click, click was coming from. He said, "Latu, do you want to surpass all of us? When we sleep, you want to continue meditating? This is not you stay with us, don't go ahead of us." And this is the kind of fun and games. Also, you see, when I tell you some of the stories of Latu, it will touch you. Let me tell you why. When Ramakrishna passed away, he served him to the last day. Now, Latu is not going to conform. He is going to lead a life on his own. He can't even stay in the monastery because he can't conform to anything. So how does he spend his life? When you listen to this is the life of a real, if you like, a realized personality. Latu would sit on the bank of the river Ganga and meditate, spend his days and nights meditating. How would he feed himself? What were his material possessions? Look, if this doesn't bring tears to your eyes, nothing else will. He had one towel, and once in a while somebody would give him a little bit of 1 or 2 paisa with which he would buy chickpeas, dry chickpeas. He would put those chickpeas in the towel, go to the bank of the Ganga, find a rock, and put this towel with the chickpeas under the rock and hold it down. And the river would flow over it, and Latu would sit on the bank of the river and go into deep meditation. When the meditation was over, and hopefully the tide is gone, he would go looking for his towel, pull it out, the chickpeas will become wet and they can be eaten. He would eat it happily. Now you see, we may think, this is poor Latu. Look, we are the poor ones. This guy was in full flow. Chickpeas, what chickpeas? He was eating nectar. For him there was no difference. Establishing God realization, these things are very trivial. He had no difficulty with any of that. He wasn't suffering. We suffer, we go, oh dear. He was in full flow. We never know what he was tasting. Not chickpeas, much more sweeter. And so the funny story about Latu that makes us smile and laugh and do whatever we like. At night, when sometimes there was rainy season, where can you find shelter, this Latu? Now in those days there will be kind of lot of compartments, cargo compartments of railway carriages would be in the siding somewhere. So you'll find some railway carriage for for transporting cargo with open door. He would say, okay, there's some straw there, I can sleep in there. So he would quietly go into the railway carriage with cargo things and just lie there and go to sleep. And then this Latu told he said, one day I was sleeping and suddenly, I got up with a jolt. They'd actually linked up that particular carriage and taken it to another village, 50 miles away. He got up in another town. Now he doesn't have money. You see, he has no money. Toil is his material wealth. So he said, now how do I get back? The only way I can get back is walk back 50 miles. He said, from that day onward, I decided not to sleep in railway carriage. Too risky. Don't know where you wake up. You see, when you look at the story of this Latu, you see a transformation to the highest level of an ordinary person turning into a great sage. Later in his life, in the final days in his life, he spent his time in Kashi, Banaras. Here, a lot of people would flock to him and ask him very subtle questions, spiritual questions about spirituality. I told you, remember what Sri Ramakrishna had said? Pure Vedas will flow out of his mouth. When he opens his mouth, purest of Vedas will flow out. This is what used to happen. Just let me give you one example of the depth of this personality. Somebody said, Maharaj, this life is very burdensome. Look, we all feel it. We may not acknowledge it, but we all feel it. Life is burdensome. So many things, unresolved issues coming up, cropping up all the time. It's very burdensome. How can we make it light? And look at the answer from this rustic. He said, my boy, suppose you dive in the river Ganga. Yeah? You dive deep in the river Ganga. Do you feel the weight of the water? You see, when you are, Archimedes knows, you don't feel any weight. In fact, you have to force yourself to go down. You're not feeling the weight of the water. In fact, you're being pushed up. You have to kind of push yourself down to stay in the water. There's no weight. You don't feel the weight. In fact, you become weightless. So he's using this example. He said, when you dive in the Ganga, do you feel the weight of the water of the Ganga on top of your head? In the same way, when you are floating in the ocean of Satchidanand, the idea of this idea that I am the spirit, what weight? The world appears a mansion of mirth, merriment. Everywhere I look, there is nothing but excitement, spiritual excitement. I live in bliss. What burden, my boy, what burden? When you recognize that you are swimming in the ocean of Satchidanand, your essential nature, the spirit, the world doesn't appear like a burden. It appears like the most pleasurable, most sweetest thing that you can ever experience. Nothing. So this poor guy, whether he's eating chickpeas which are hard or soft, makes no difference. It is all Satchidanand for him. Full bliss. So we look at this classification, good, bad, harsh. For him, it's all sweet. This is what is meant by Brahman, Brahmagnan. See this young boy, a rustic, established in the highest, if you like, spiritual experience. This is just one of the 16 disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. I can tell you, all of them were God realized. They were very exciting. All were as different as you can imagine. Each one is different and individual. Let me bring in a second character. We do fast forward. What is the relation between this Rakhal and Narendra? I'll talk about the story of Narendra in a minute. But before I do the story, let me show you the relationship between Narendra and Latu. You see, Latu had difficulty in pronouncing the word no from Bihar. So you pronounce it lo. So you would call, Narendra was called Noren in Bengal. So you say Loren. He couldn't do Noren. So Loren. And so Loren and Latu became very close friends. Both at the extreme ends of the spectrum of intellect. Complete extreme. And become the best of friends. So they would kind of thump each other back and everything. Tremendous closeness between these two extremes. But one day there was a fight between them as well. I'll tell you how. It's interesting to watch this kind of interaction between different disciples. You see, Ramakrishna was so drawn to Naren or Loren in terms of that he needed to see him from time to time. I'm going to do the story of Naren in a minute, but this I must bring in a bit in advance. If Naren doesn't come to visit Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna goes to visit Naren. He can't live without him. Tremendous attraction toward Narendra, Vivekananda. So one Vivekananda was studying for his exams at university, sitting for his degree exams, and he's studying. And he's upstairs in the upstairs room, and suddenly hears a commotion, some noise. Ramakrishna had taken his Latu to come and visit Narendra. And then he is trying to climb up the steps in his kind of good intoxicated state. He's trying to climb up. And as soon as Narendra comes out of the door, opens the door and looks down, Ramakrishna looks at and went into Samadhi there, in the middle of the steps. Standard stuff. He went into Samadhi halfway up the steps. And Latu is hanging on to him. And thus he toppled over. He's hanging on to him. And Narendra speaks English and says, idiot, comes and makes a mess here. He's calling Ramakrishna idiot. And this Latu doesn't understand English. He said, what does idiot mean? If it means something rude, I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to beat you. Then he said, no, it means something very good. Don't worry. Let's pull this old man in before he topples over. But this was the love and relation between this Naren and this Latu. Both at different extreme. One intellectual giant, other one couldn't bother. What did you call him? What did you call Ramakrishna? Tell me, I'm going to beat you up. That relation. This is Latu and this is Narendra. This Latu, he spent his last days in Kashi, and lots of pandits, lots of great devotees would crowd around him. And he spent his days dishing out the spirituality that his master had given him. The lovely material, the most kind of modern vision of spirituality came out of his mouth. When you look at his teachings, it is thrilling. It is without any guilt. There is no guilt. It's very blunt, very raw, and very direct. One person said, I keep getting lustful thoughts. What should I do? He said, look, I tell you what. See this image? Just focus your mind on this image. It will all disappear. This is the most potent image. It will remove it for you. He would give a blunt example. He would give talk like that, very bluntly. In the final days, some of the senior Swamis of the Ramakrishna mission would come and visit him in Kashi and reverentially touch his feet. Somebody said, but you are a senior Swami. He is a junior. He does not even belong to the Ramakrishna. He lives separately. Why do you touch his feet? And the Swami was very humble. He said, do you know why? He's younger than me in age. He's younger than me in terms of the authority of the Ramakrishna order. But he's the most senior of us because he's the first one to become the disciple of Ramakrishna. He's the most senior of all of us because he's the first disciple of Ramakrishna. That's why we touch his feet. He lived in this majestic state, couldn't be bothered about anything. Many years he lived, do you know with what? His other possession that he had in later life, apart from this towel, was a teapot. Boil tea, drink tea, that's it, live on it. I'm not saying that the rest of us should follow, it's very difficult. He lived so simply and yet lived so magically. That is why he's the miracle of Ramakrishna.